Like, when do you legally have to provide training?
I mean, like, so if it's required training, and you hire someone knowing that they don't have that required training, then it is, talk to an attorney, LegalShield.com, great resource. But I have talked to many HR people and attorneys. And so if your funder requires, let's say, RBT, CPR, first aid, they require maybe a crisis intervention. I'm seeing lots more funders now requiring cultural competency. So things like this, if they require it and your staff do not have it and you hire them, you're required to pay for it and the time that it takes to complete it. So that's just a best rule of thumb, I would say. RBT training, I mean, the expense of it is like, I mean, you can get free ones now, right? We have one, happy medium. Everybody seems to love it on our website. It's $40. I think the biggest pushback I get from that is, well, they need it for their RBT certification and they get to leave with their RBT. So I don't have to pay for that, right?
But what about competency though? Because competency training is a big piece of, it's not just completing the 40-hour online class or whatever, right? There's competency. And I would think that when we owned our own company, even if someone came to us with an RBT certification, or came to us already at BCBA, right? Part of that intake process and part of the orientation and just getting started with working with us once they had accepted the job was to see where their skill sets are and their experience is. And we had a lot of RBTs that came to us with an RBT certification and they said, oh yeah, no, someone just checked off on that. Like I never really did competencies. Right. And so that after having a few of those situations, we started doing our own competency checks. Of course, if we were helping them go through and get their RBT, but even if they already came to us as an RBT or a BCBA, we did our own competency checks.
Right. And so the way it works, correct me if I'm wrong, you take the course, the 40 hours, then your supervisor is supposed to check competencies in each one of the areas, right? And then you take the exam. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I can remember this one RBT. She turned out to be a great RBT and she was with us for a long time. But during the interview process, and I know enough about ABA to be dangerous, right? But we asked her, what's manned? What is a manned? And she couldn't answer it. And she had an RBT certificate. And it's like, okay, how did this happen, right? And again, no judgment. It's just, what are we doing here, right? We're putting these people in a house by themselves a lot of the time for 40 hours a week or, whatever. And they don't know the basics of the job.
Yeah.
And then we all kind of go, why is everybody complaining about the services we provide? Right? Like, come on. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so we have an RBT course as well. And part of that is we have lots of feedback throughout. I'm sure you do too. And so it's interesting to look at some of the feedback and stuff that's provided. But, occasionally the organizations will have people who are already certified go through and take the training. And it's always interesting to see the feedback, which is nice for us, where it's like, oh, I'm understanding this for the very first time. But my point of that is also that just because someone has done this training doesn't mean that they really learned all of the content that they needed to learn and the skills that they needed to learn, which is, your point about the competency assessments as well. And that's, I think, as I'm thinking about, there's all the new 40-hour, the third edition 40-hour training requirements went into effect January 1st. And one of the big changes with that is that before there was just kind of the task list and it's a bucket of content and you as a training provider allocate how much time to spend on all of that. And the board has moved to these different domains. I think there's 8 of them. I should know this off the top of my head for how long I've spent mapping everything out and designing everything. But in terms of that, it's providing minimums per area. So like documentation and reporting is one of them. Behavior change procedures is like 20 of the 40 hours. Intro to ABA, I think, is just like 2 hours. Pairing and rapport building is just 1 hour basically. And so they came up with these minimums, which is in theory a really good thing to spend that much time on like direct procedures and things like that. But I guess the bigger point that I'm trying to get at is 40 hours or content area minimums, things like that. That still is really just about the content and how much instruction was delivered. You're still not really measuring learning outcomes based on that. And if you think about our regulations, just because of what is easier to regulate, so much of it is around seat time or hours time, 40 hours of training, 2,000 hours of supervision. But outside of like the competency assessment, for example, or the exams, there's not a lot of true measurement of like, are you able to actually apply this? Are you able to actually demonstrate these skills when you're done with this training or these 2,000 hours?
Yes, because that's the important part.
Yeah,
being able to demonstrate, right? And then I too, I think there's an important part, and I may be jumping ahead, but okay, let's say they demonstrate competency. Let's say that they can generally show that they understand these basic concepts, right? But then there's the generalization piece, right? Because we all know that not every single learner that we work with, we're all different. All humans are a little different, and the autism presents different, or even if, beyond autism, depending on what population that you're providing services for. And so there's that generalization piece. There's that fluency, being able to like think quickly on your feet, right?